So let's talk about get elements and variables in Flow. And for that, I invite our guest, Andy Yutkin, to talk about himself and present our variables for us. Andy?
Okay, thank you very much, Andrea, for inviting me to the Vancouver meeting, and everybody, thanks for having me and listening to Flows today. Um, I'm going to take you through a simple example to show you the get elements on Flow and also the variables, the use of variables in Flow elements. If you have been through, if you have been participating in the last session where Igor presented to you, I watched the recording for that session. Igor is fantastic. The example that he had, I saw that some of you came up with the questions about the variables, and that was a difficult concept for you to grasp immediately. And that's why we focused this session on that part of flow skills. And that was also a very good learning experience for me, understanding that you have to build that knowledge up before you start talking about possibly get elements and so on. So I introduced myself already. Let's skip this part. Let's go into the next slide. Well, now, before we go into a flow example, and we are going to build a flow live, I want to explain to you the concept of variables. The concept of variables are very important in any development or in any language, development language. At the same time, in low-code platforms like Salesforce Flow, especially when you're dealing with a screen flow where you're asking the user to enter some information, or you need to get some information from the database, the current values for record variables. You are going to use variables to store that information so that you can process that later, right? So the variables, how many people have heard universal containers, on the Salesforce platform? When you're actually doing work on the Salesforce platform, they have certain company names that they use and reuse all the time. So in exams, they always mention universal containers. I don't think they mean these containers, but I wanted to use this example to explain to you the variables. Now, the variables are kind of like containers where you keep information in temporarily, right? When you're talking about keeping information, you can talk about constants and you can talk about variables. Variables by nature are going to change in time. You're putting values inside containers so that you can process them, you can add to them, you can retrieve them, you can write new values to them. So in this example, you see right next to the first line, there is the variable and there's a corkscrew right inside that container. So we are actually keeping one value, which is the corkscrew, inside that container for us to use later. So this would be an example of a variable. Now, we have also the option in flows to use collection variables. And collection variables are n number of containers where I can keep the same type of information, but they don't have to be exactly the same. They don't have to be equal. Now, I didn't illustrate this one very well in this picture, but the corkscrew, the first one could have a wooden handle. The second one would have a plastic red handle. The third one would have a green handle. So they would be similar. They would be all corkscrews, but they could be different corkscrews, right? So you could store all these in a collection variable, different values of the same type, and n number of them that would actually make a collection variable for you. And what a record variable is actually the same similar concept, but this time a single element inside the variable is actually a full record. And when we say record, we're talking about one instance, one value of an object. Like, for example, think about contacts. Contacts have tens of different fields underneath them, right? So in those fields, we are going to have values. And in this example, the container, this would be a kitchen container that you have in your drawer or something. And you could be saving a spoon, a cocktail spoon, and, you know, like a stopper or something like that. So you could have all these things that you want to keep in those containers you want to use or reuse later or process later in their own containers of the same type. And when we talk about collection record variables, it's again the same concept, similar to collection variables. Now, in this case, we have a number of contact records that we are storing in variables. So in this example, we will have again a serving spoon, a metal serving spoon in the first one, a wooden serving spoon in the second one, and a green plastic one in the third one, but they'll all be spoons in that container. And again, the same concept with the other fields. So when we go back to Salesforce world, these would be all different contact records. So the first one would be the contact record for Andy. The second one would be the contact record for Mark. And the third one would be the contact record for Tamara. And the fields underneath those, all the fields would be the same, but the values would be different. So the gender would say male, female, and etc. It will go like that. So you would store those to process those later. So any question on this topic so far? Okay. Can we go to the next slide, Andrea? So what we are going to do today, and we're going to build a flow together. It's going to be a very simple use case. And the use case is we are going to, first of all, this is what I'm trying to do when I explain flow concepts in a simple manner. First of all, we are going to use the objects and the fields that you already have in any developer instance or your playground that you have opened on Trailhead, right? So you can do this yourself very easily. We are not going to use any custom objects, any custom fields. So we're just going to use what Salesforce offers to us in a standard instance. So we are going to get an opportunity record. We are going to display the name, account, amount, and close date on the screen. This is a screen flow, obviously. And ask the user how many days they would like to advance the close date on that opportunity, and save the record with the new close date. So this is going to illustrate in a very, very simple way the concept of variables as well at the same time. So let's go to, let me share my screen now. Oh yeah, let's see that picture now before we do that. Andrea, let me just, well, I can actually show it in my instance. Yeah, okay, well, this is the flow. It's very simple, right? So it has only, well, the start element comes standard, as you know, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, and then the end. So it's only in 4 steps. Okay, let me just build one out for you. Okay.
Oh, I see your screen. I see your screen.
Yeah, okay. Before we go into further detail, let me just show you also the variable types, right? The variables, as we discussed, could be different types. So they could be a text, a number, a currency, a Boolean, date and time, pick list, multi-select pick list. There is also the record in Apex defined, but those are more advanced topics. What this means is, like, if you have a string, for example, you need to define your variable as a text to be able to store both letters and numbers in it. If you define your variable as a number and then you try to pass a value to that variable, that's ABC123, it's not going to work. So you need to make sure that you define your variables the correct type, and then you process accordingly. So let's go to our example. Here, I'm going to first go to my opportunities. I'm going to show you how this works first. This is also one of my learnings, one of my preferences that I have built up in time. I think people, everybody understands the concepts better if they first see how it works, and then we go ahead and build it. So this is a standard opportunity record for universal containers, and it's the big opportunity with the amount of 1 million. And the close date on that opportunity is 11/18/2020, right? So this is an existing opportunity. As most of you know, probably all of you know, there is a unique record ID for every record in Salesforce, and we can actually see it right here. I'm going to copy this record ID to use in my flow. So I built this universal containers advanced opportunity here. It's the same one that you've seen. This is a winter 21 instance, and I use the beta auto layout feature. That's why my flow looks so nice. You know, I'm usually the clumsy flow builder. You know, I build flows that are like pages long, and I drive my coworker crazy. I have a coworker who is quite diligent in building beautiful flows, and you know, I'm not really good at it. So this is going to be a very good feature for him, I think. So now when I debug this one, the way the flow works, it has a variable inside the flow. It's called the opportunity ID. And as I will show you in a moment, we are able to mark some of our variables as an input variable or as an output variable or both. So this one is marked as an input variable, which means I can pass a value to it as I debug my flow. So now the flow displays on the screen opportunity titled Universal Containers, Big Opportunity, with the account Universal Containers Inc. and the amount of 1 million. Has the following close date, November 18, 2020. And now the flow is asking me advance close date by this number of days. I say, okay, I want to advance the close date by 2 days. And when I do that, I can see on my debug screen that it actually processed, as you can see, fast update opportunity stepped processed, and now the new close date for the opportunity is 11/19/2020. Let's go back to the Salesforce instance to check whether that's true. So this is my opportunity. This was my close date before. Refresh my screen, and now the close date is 11/20/2020. You're going to need to refresh your screen if you want to see the new value because you have the previous record open when you're doing this. So let's go ahead and build that flow together, see how it works. Now I'm going to deactivate this flow. It's not a record triggered flow. It actually doesn't matter. We're going to call on the flow ourselves, but still. So with Winter 21, this is the screen that we get. I don't know if it changed with Winter 21. I think it changed a little bit. In this case, we are going to use the screen flow. What's a screen flow? A screen flow is a flow type that facilitates the data entry and interaction, and then it kind of batches transactions and display of information and input of information into several screens. So it'll guide the user to read learn and also enter information through several screens. So you can do this internally on your Salesforce instance, or you can actually expose a flow, a screen flow, using a community or a Visualforce page to external users as well. Now, with Winter 21, is when we select we want to do a screen flow, we are presented with two options. It's either classic freeform or auto layout beta. I mean, it's a new feature. Let's go ahead and try the auto layout together. If you worked with flows before, this is a little bit different. I mean, in addition to Salesforce organizing the layout for you, it also changes. I mean, the system also changed in the sense you got to add your new elements over here rather than dragging them from over here. So once you start your flow, what you want to do is you want to actually add your element by clicking on that plus and then selecting amongst the options that you are presented. So the first thing we want to do right now is our use case is saying we want to modify some values in an opportunity record. And we want to use a particular opportunity record. So in this case, we want to get all the values for that opportunity record, and we are going to modify the close date on that. So our first step is going to be get records. Now, when you get records, you are presented many options. Now, I'm going to show you a couple of them. And then at the end of the session, I'm going to also go back and show you a couple others. I don't want to confuse you right now. But the first thing you got to do is you got to name your element, obviously. I usually name them get opportunity in a similar fashion. And then you want to choose the object type that you want to get. And as soon as you mark that, you are presented with other options. You want to select which condition Salesforce needs to use because we want to retrieve only one single record, right? So we need to say, I want the ID. When I click on this one, it's going to present me all the different fields that an opportunity has. I want to have the ID equal to the ID I want the user to enter on the screen, or like to pass as a variable at the beginning of the debug sequence. There are several ways of passing that record ID to a flow, actually, but we are not going to go into that detail right now. So we are just going to debug, and then we're going to pass the ID manually. So now here, our variable is going to come into play. Now, ID is going to equal something, but what is it going to equal? We need to define a new resource of variable type. And then let's name this one opportunity ID. That's how I name them usually. And then here I have to define the data type. Whenever you're dealing with IDs, your data type is going to be text. And this is exactly where you would mark if you wanted this variable to be a collection variable. If you wanted to store multiple values for ID, this is where you would mark it. So in this case, we want to only store one single ID. That's why we're not going to mark that one. We don't have a default value. And this is where you would mark as well if you wanted this variable to be an input variable to your flow, either through the initial dialog when you launch it or through several other methods. So in this case, we want this one to be an input variable. So now we have concluded our filtering opportunity records. For you who are more advanced, a get element is the element that does our SQL operation for Salesforce. So it is going to go look for a record that has the ID value that's exactly the same as opportunity ID. And here you are again presented with several options. In this case, we want to store only the first record, and we want to store the fields automatically. I have also the option of picking which fields on the opportunity record I want to store. But this functionality actually came like 2 releases before, I think. This is a fantastic functionality. We don't have to pick one by one which variables we want to store on that record. So now that we got the record, we can go ahead and build our screen element. So I'm going to hide the header for now. I need to name the screen something. Let's call it opportunity screen. It's going to give an automatic API name. Now what I want to do is, the flows don't have the concept of read-only fields. If you want to display something and it's going to be just read-only, you are going to drag a display text element into your flow, your component. Let's name this one text element. And here you are going to type the static data, static text, and also variables inside your element. This is what is going to be displayed on the screen. So you are going to say opportunity titled. Now this is where we are going to use the variables that we got through get. We didn't create separate variables and store all these values into those variables. Instead, Salesforce created a record variable for us that we can call the field values for. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start typing get here. As soon as I start and type get, I'm going to see a record variable that Salesforce automatically created for me. And I click on that one. And for some silly reason, that takes sometimes twice doing. And then I'm going to start typing name. And when I type name, it's going to show me the opportunity name. So this is the syntax that I would use to be able to call the opportunity name from my display text element. And Salesforce facilitates and helps me with that by me typing that into the insert the resource section. Opportunity. How is it going so far, folks? Any questions? All right.
Yeah, so just a reminder, sorry, Andy, if you have questions and you're not comfortable to verbally ask them, make sure you put on the chat. I'm monitoring and we will make sure to answer your questions at the time, okay?
Okay. Sounds good. Thank you, Andrea. So opportunity title, get opportunity name. With the account, get, again, opportunity. And then there, I want to include the account name. Now, the account name is a little bit more tricky. If I go click on this account, it's going to list all the account fields that I have. There's actually another one here that's account ID. If I want the account ID only, I can just use that. But in this case, I want to use the account name, so I'm going to go further down into the rabbit hole and then click on account and then say, I want the account name. So opportunity titled, get opportunity name with the account and amount, get opportunity amount has the following close date. And here I'm going to go ahead and include the close date value from the record. And we're done here, I think. And now I need to ask the user how many days they want to advance the close date. That requires for me to ask them a number. So I will drag a number element and call this one advance opportunity close date by number of days. And let's require it, why not? And this is it. That should do it. I go done. I have my screen. Now, one thing to remember here, though, is the name of the element here where I'm asking for the number of days. So it's called advance opportunity close date by the system is ignoring when it's constructing the API name. It's not going to use special characters. So that number sign is going to be ignored. So what I have learned building flows is actually long names are good. Try and describe your fields as much as you can inside the name so that once you start searching for the name, it's going to be easier for you to find it. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to do an assignment step. And we're going to call this one assign new close date. Now, what we want to do is we want to get the close date from the record variable field value, get opportunity close date, and we want to advance this one. Salesforce offers us in the assignment step also an add operator. We want to advance this one by, as soon as I start typing advance, it's going to show me the screen component matching by advance opportunity close date by number of days. So what have I completed so far? I got my record that I wanted to work with, all the variable values. I showed the user the values. I accepted an entry from the user for the number of days that they want to advance the close date by, and then I assigned the new close date to the record variable. So I have a new value for the close date, but I haven't written anything to the database, right? So that'll be my update step. So similar to get, we have also update record steps. And these are for the more advanced users. These are your DML operations. Update opportunity. Now, there are several ways, again, you can update a record or record value. You can update field values one by one, or you can just update the whole record that you have just got. So in this case, we are going to say, we are going to update the opportunity from get opportunity as a whole. So if I have changed multiple values in that record variable, they are all going to be updated to the database. In this case, we have only changed one value, so that's going to be the only change. So let's save this one and see whether we are going to face any errors. Universal containers opportunity class flow, let's say. And save. No errors. Okay, let's go ahead and debug this one, see if this works. Now, remember, our universal containers big opportunity that we have been working is now on due date 11/20/2020. Where am I? Too many tabs. Okay, let's debug this one. I'm going to use the same record ID that I had copied. And yes, the due date is November 2020. I want to advance it by 5 days this time. And here I can see in my debug that the due date was updated to the database as 11/24/2020. And when I go back to my record, where is it? Right here. And I refresh my screen, look up the details again. Boom. Voila, guys. So we have updated the close date based on the information that we got from the user. So let's do questions and answers. And if we have time, we can go into more complex functionality if you'd like.
Okay, so Deepak had a question. As a best practice, do we need to have a fault screen if there is an error returned in a get element?
Yes.
Example, no records returned.
Yes. Well, that's something that I wanted to go back to, and I will do that definitely. Let's do that like in a moment after we answer any other questions that we have.
Okay, so why there is difference in debug and actual date, 1 day difference? Is it because of a date and time?
There was a difference?
There was 1 day off, it seems.
Okay, let's see.
Yeah, the debug's at 11/24.
Oh, really? Well, yeah, this is the thing. As you see right here, well, this is the thing with Salesforce. Now, the dates that you have on records are usually internally date and time type. They are displayed as dates, and usually when you're entering, you're asked to enter dates, but internally they are stored as date and time. And for some silly reason, the Flow platform ignores the time zone. I've had really weird instances where I had to actually, well, what was the example? We had this example for a client on the West Coast, and I think certain time of the day it was supposed to the flow was supposed to create a task, and it was creating the task for the day after. You know, it was just advancing to the next day or something. So I had to subtract 3 hours to account for the time zone. So I'm sure it's a time zone issue. Let's see. Let's do this debug one more time. $25, 3 days. Yeah, it says, see, I'm trying to advance 3 days, and it says it's advancing supposedly right now 2 days. Now, let's see one thing. So this is, the close date is November 25th to start with, right?
What is the starting date from the opportunity though? Could that be the case? Because the debug is looking at today's date and the opportunities have a different starting date?
Okay, let's do this. Let's create a variable of date and time, close date and time. And let's pass this close date to this variable right here. As soon as we get it, assign close date to see whether my close date and time equals get opportunity close date. Whether my hypothesis is true or not, we'll be able to tell here. Now, instead of displaying the close date here from the record, I'm going to display the variable value that I have defined as date and time. So that should also show me if there is a time assigned to that close date. That should also show me that. Okay. Save. Do we have any errors? No. Let's see. So look, the 11/27/2020 is 4 p.m., right?
Mm-hmm.
So when I advance this one by 2 days.
But if you were looking at that record currently in the system, it would show 11/28, right? Correct?
That's great comment, Mark. That's what we need to check right here.
Yeah.
Let's see.
Yeah, 11/28.
It's 11/28.
And then what time zone is your org in currently? Is that what makes the difference, you think? The time zone that your org is set for? Your company information default?
My understanding is this, Mark. Now, obviously, your instance is working in a time zone that is set, and your user is too. But your flow always works in UTC or something.
UTC, got it. Okay, that makes sense.
So that's the problem. And in fact, there are ideas, I think, on the idea exchange that says, you know, we need a way of dealing with time zones because this is ridiculous. Because you have to, as a flow builder, you have to account for that. And then, like I said, I hard coded a 3-hour subtraction into my flow just for this, which is not probably the best way of doing it if you're dealing with a client instance. You need a better variable way of doing this, like based on the time zone that you're operating in. So does that explain? I mean, I know it's confusing. I did not realize that was going to happen. I would have picked something different maybe to illustrate.
It's good to see it though, just so you know when you start messing with flows, don't get confused when stuff like that happens, right? Just know that if you debug it, I mean, that's only when you debug it anyways. You're not going to see that in real life. You're just going to see it in the debug, right? So it's good to know.
Well, if you take that date and time, Mark, and then you want to stamp that one, like you want to stamp something with that, you see that in production. Not in this example. Not in this example, but if you say, like, for example, take this date and time and then use it in an operation, like update a record with that date and time or something. Like in our example, we were capturing the submission date for a form, and the submission date and time we wanted to capture from the flow. And the flow would just say like, okay, now parentheses or something. It would just stamp it with that. And that was messing things up. It does happen. Okay, any more questions?
So basically what we understand is that not necessarily the system time zone against the user time zone would not be exactly the difference for that. I mean,
My understanding is Flow ignores the time zones.
Okay.
So
Okay.
you could have different time zones for the user and the org, but I think Flow ignores it. If you're taking an existing value and you're advancing it by 30 days and things like that, you'll be fine. You could see some different debugging like this one.
Sounds good. Fantastic. I don't see any other questions on the
Okay.
chat. Do you guys have further questions?
Let me go back to the get step then, because we wanted to go in further detail in the get step.
Fantastic. Okay. Yeah.
Okay. So now, if you wanted to do error handling, that was a very good question, because get steps can cause a lot of problems. See, it used to be that when you had a connector already here in the non-auto layout format, and then you try to draw another connector, that would become the fault connector. And you can see that because it'll be dashed. Now, in the auto layout beta, you have actually, when you click on the element, get element, you have actually the option here, add a fault path. So fault paths are good and bad, my personal take on them. Now, fault paths are good because when you get a record and you have an error that you cannot, I mean, it's a, what was the term for that? It's an unsalvageable error, right? You know, it's going to, the whole thing is going to fail. And it is, the Flow is going to generate an email, a fault email. Now here, when you draw a fault line and then you start building here screen elements, you can build actions to email, you can do a lot of things. It's great, but you're still going to get an error email. So I mean, in any case, you don't want to be here. You want to calculate all the different possibilities, and you probably want to have a fault line here and then, you know, email yourself or something to make sure that you don't end up in trouble. But in any case, the Flow is going to email the administrator or the person who built it, whatever, with the error anyway, if it ends up in an error. So your aim should be, from my perspective, to build something that's going to not end up in the fault connector. So it's always good to have the fault connector, but hopefully you'll never end up there. Now, one of the very common practices that needs to be done for that is, I use this a lot. So when you're getting a record, let me actually do this on another example. This is not a good example to do this. I've actually built another example just in case we have time to go into it. So there is a total amount opportunity example here. This one is an auto launch flow. It's not a screen flow. So what it does is it gets opportunities. Let's not go into the loop and details yet, but it gets opportunities that are on the same close date. So this get is a little bit different than the other one, because with the other one, we were trying to get just one record matching the unique ID. This is a more common example where you would not get any results. So in this case, this is going to list all the close date, all the opportunities on the same close date, and it's going to save all those for you to process later. Now, another way of doing this, if I wanted to get only the first one, for example, I would mark this one, right? I could automatically store all fields again, but if I have no match, then I could end up in trouble again. So a common practice for what we would do in this kind of scenario, we would say, if I'm looking especially for one record only, I would create a resource here for the opportunity ID again of type text variable. And then I would use this one here on my get step to say, I want only one opportunity record that's matching this close date. And I want it sorted by ascending order of created date. Whenever you have the possibility of multiple matches, you should always sort your results so that your results will be predictable. And then instead of automatically storing all fields, I'm going to say choose fields and assign variables. And I'm going to say in separate variables, and I want to capture the ID of this record. And I want to pass this one to the opportunity ID I just created. The reason for all this trouble is this gives you the possibility. Now I need to figure out how to move my Zoom screen because it's covering. The reason for all this trouble is this gives you the ability to mark this checkbox here. That's actually quite critical. So when no records are returned, set specified variables to null. So when you choose this one, and then you add a decision here saying, is my opportunity ID null? Opportunity ID is null, true. Then you just got yourself an error check without using the fault lines that doesn't generate an email to people. So you would build your flow right here on the yes branch, and on the no branch, you'll know you didn't get any match. You could possibly email somebody. If this was a screen flow, you would show on the screen. This is what we'd call a salvageable error on the user part. So you'll show the user, you know what, the close date you picked didn't yield any results. So you might want to pick another close date. So kick them back to the previous screen so that they can keep trying without creating an error or a fault. Was I able to explain that well?
Does this clarify the question, Deepak?
Yep, thank you.
Thank you. Also, Andy, there is a question from Tamara on why are we using the flow? Because the user cannot edit the opportunity directly, or does the flow require an approval to change the close date?
Good question. Now, there are several reasons why you would use a flow. First of all, if you have multiple screens and dialogues that could depend on other things, like, if you want to go down through logic branches like this one, and then you want to walk the user through several screens to process information, then you would use a flow. That could be to the internal user, external user. Another good reason to use a flow is, which is not illustrated in our example here, a flow gives you a wonderful way of updating related records together. So I have flows, for example, for a nonprofit, that's a senior citizen intake form that updates the information on account, on the contact, and on the senior intake form object record. All three of them at the same time, and then I walk the user through like 10 screens to answer that information. Another reason for flow could be also sharing invisibility. That's right. I mean, with the later releases, we've got the ability to run our flows at, can you still see my screen?
Yep. Yep.
See, we have now the ability, the functionality to run the flow at the system context without sharing, which is the God mode. So, which means if the user didn't have access to those records to update them, and if you wanted them to be able to do that, use this responsibly, folks. It could be it could be dangerous. So you are giving them the ability to update those records.
Cool.
That is definitely dangerous. I don't see any other questions in the chat. Do you guys have more questions for Andy on flows? Speak now or forever hold your peace.
So are you up for going a little bit further into the rabbit hole, or?
We have about 30 minutes to go. So how?
Let me show you one more thing then.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, because I want to tie this topic back to Igor's example because he's had a loop, right? So let's do the loop part too, so that hopefully we can get things clear. Now, I told you I built another example for you to possibly show you, and I was just illustrating the fault and error over there on that example. But let's go back to that. And this is an what type of flow was this? This is an auto launch flow. So it has to be called by something else for it to run, or we're just going to run it in debug mode to look at it. An auto launch flow means it doesn't have any screen dialog, so there couldn't be any screen display of information or input of information. What this one does is it's going to get all the opportunities. We looked at this a little bit a moment ago. It's going to get all the opportunities on a certain close date, and it's going to automatically store all the records and all the fields. Do you remember the collection record variable that was on the bottom of that slide? This is what that is. So the system is going to auto-generate a record collection variable for us and store all the information for all these opportunities for me to process. When I say store, I mean like it's going to remember, let's say it's not storing on the database. So we are going to loop through those opportunities. We have the ability to loop through a collection variable. So however many records I get, that's the number of loops this loop is going to run through. So from first to last item, it's going to loop through those opportunities. Again, this is a more recent change where we don't really have to create variables to for our loop. I can actually use the current item from my loop by using the same naming convention here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to loop through all those records, and this is that that note on the bottom of the loop that was being mentioned. I can just use the same naming convention here, loop opportunities, and then dot amount. If you start typing here, Salesforce is going to help you to select that. This means take the current opportunity and the amount number for that opportunity, and you know what? Take that number and add it to the total amount variable I have created. This is a currency variable. I can tell by this dollar bill right here. And it's going to add all those numbers when looping to one variable. What do I do with that number? I didn't do anything with that number. I can actually write it to a record or something. In this case, I'm just going to show you on my debug screen. So to make this interesting, let's go back to our opportunities and then try to find a common close date for opportunities. I do a lot of testing on this instance, so I have a lot of opportunities here, especially on 4/5/2018. I have 250,000, 350,000. So there's a good amount, possibly, I don't know, 20, 30 opportunities on 4/5/2018, which is a past date, by the way, but hey. So let's go and debug this flow. So it's going to, I marked that close date as an input variable. So it's going to ask me the close date. And I'm going to say, I want to run this on opportunities with the close date 4/5/2018, run. See, you need to get used to and accustom yourself reading debug logs. I mean, the debug on Flow is really good. There's a lot of information here because it's looping. You'll see the beginning and then you'll see the end. But you see that it's looping through a lot of records. These are all the record IDs. And it actually iterated 30 times to total the amount of opportunities to $5,760,000. Here you can see the loop opportunity amount being added step by step. So like the final number is 5,760. The number before is 510. Right before that is 5,160. So it goes like this. So it's looping. It's looping, adding, looping, adding, looping, adding.
My question with the loop, it's that what is the risk that this will impact our governor limit? Because anytime I hear the word loop, that's the first thing that comes to my mind. How are we going to put the system to repeat this over and over? And how is that going to impact on our limits?
Okay, there are two important things to remember when looping. So unless you know for a fact how many times you're running through the loop and you have calculated the impact on governor limits and you have a hard stop, you could have like a counter and you could say, I want this to run only up to 5 times or something. You can get out of the loop. Unless you have done all that, there are two things that are no inside the loop. One is get, the other one is update. Those are your SOCWALs and DML operations. And the only 99% of the time, those are the only governor limits you have to worry about. Your SOCWAL and your DML governor limits. There are also other things, but usually they don't come into play much. So in this example, the only thing we're doing, that's the beauty of this example, the only thing we're doing is we're just adding numbers. And if I wanted to remember that number, capture that number, update it to the database, I could have had a custom record or something that will say like total of opportunities by close date or something. You know, I would update that value here to that record, object record, but that would be outside the loop. So that would be only one DML operation, one update operation, and we are allowed multiple. So
great, thank you. It's really interesting to me because I haven't done many development or anything, but when I did the Red Woman program and started kind of learning a little bit more scripts and all the Apex codes, and I don't remember much, but what I remember is that watch out for loops. Loops are never a good thing. So Nancy is asking if there is any limitation you have run into that you would like to point out.
Well, is the question
limitation on flow? I mean, sorry.
Like the limitation of flow compared to process, compared to Apex, Nancy, can you tell us?
Oh, okay.
Unmute yourself.
Just wondering, I know flow is very powerful. Just wondering have you ever had a use case where you were trying to use flow as a solution and then you ran into a roadblock, or has it been kind of the go-to tool for you outside of development, of course?
Yeah, well, good question, Nancy, thank you. Now, flow, surprisingly enough, is also very popular amongst developers because it's much easier to test and deploy. So So flow is a very good and powerful tool. There are a couple of things that advanced users of automation are missing, and they want those features to be included until they convert all of their processes and everything else to flow. Now, a couple of those are: one, the flows currently don't have the functionality to call for is changed and is new. In process, you have the ability within a single process to check whether the process ran because a new record has been created or a record has been updated. I'm talking about in the context of record triggered flows. Record triggered flows compared to process, the flow is unaware whether the flow has been launched for a new record or an update of a record. Now, you can actually create separate flows for this. Like you can say, okay, I want to create a record changed flow, a record triggered and record change flow, and I want to create a record triggered and new record kind of flow. So two different flows on the same object. But because of past history and the unpredictable nature of the sequence of running for those automation steps, some advanced users are hesitant to use that. By the way, Salesforce has been moving away from one automation per object rule. So it used to be that they wanted you to create only one record trigger automation per object. Now they are moving away from that. They are saying you can do multiple. Another thing that it doesn't know is it doesn't know the prior value. Now there are workarounds for before save flows, because in before save flows you can get the previous value and the new value kind of with workarounds, but especially after save flows are completely unaware of what the previous value is. So if you wanted to do some conditional processing based on what the previous value of the field is, let's say, okay, well, I have an opportunity with an amount of $1 million and I'm trying to increase that to $2 million. Or $1 million, I'm trying to decrease that to 500,000. So you cannot really do that right now in flows.
Yeah, I think this is a good point too. Like on this best practice about having one automation can also be hard to maintain. Think about a process builder with 6 or 7 different nodes that you have different things happening in each node. Like one creates a new record, the other one updates a record, the other one change something. So if something goes wrong with that process builder, you're going to spend a lot of time trying to figure it out which one is the process that is breaking the process builder. So it can be one thing to keep in mind too. And flow debug is something that is quite handy to help you find the issue, which I don't think we have on process builder. I'm afraid to say something that is wrong, but I think as far as I remember, we don't have a debug functionality for
the process
builder.
debug is very difficult. You have to probably set up logs and look through them. It's very difficult. And
Yeah.
one more thing, of course, let's not forget, we haven't looked at record triggered flows here much. Record triggered flows, the elements that you can use are very limited. You cannot, for example, you cannot update related object records. You don't have many of these elements that you have available to you in record triggered flows. You don't have them yet. They are going to make them available.
Yeah, I think, thank you so much for that, Andy. Like, I think you have a point. We are in a very good spot right now if you're particularly new and if you're learning flows, because flow seems to be the way of the future. And as much as we can learn ahead of the curve, we will be ready as the changes come. It will be just something to incorporate to our tool set instead of learning everything from scratch, right? I think this is a great step that you guys are taking today, and I appreciate. I don't see any other questions, Andy. So if
Do you want to show the resources?
Yes.
Yeah.
Let me just take the screen from you. I think you need to,
Ah.
okay, I can stop your sharing. Sorry.
Yeah, I stopped it now. I'm sorry.
Okay.
When
No,
I
no,
take
don't worry.
over, you know.
Now I think you need to give me host from,
What?
I don't know, where's my sharing? No, I'm kidding. Like seriously, guys, I'm using so many different tools nowadays that I don't know how to work any of them. It's Hangouts, it's Google Meets, it's Zoom, it's WebEx. I don't know how you guys faring. I'm going crazy. So, Andy, take it away.
Okay, so I want to share with you some resources that you can use in your Salesforce learning, the flow learning journey. Now, I have a YouTube channel where I'm experimenting and trying to put little lessons into bite-sized elements. I usually try to stay under 10 minutes, but sometimes I cannot manage. So this is the channel. It is a very long and ugly link, but if you subscribe and if I get over 100 subscriptions, I think I can create a human readable link after that point. So I like video content, and the video recommendations are all on that YouTube channel. So you'll see a featured channels section right here. You see on that screen print, and you will see that Salesforce Apex Hours is on there, Chris Emmett, and the Walter 954, Jonathan Fox, and all those guys. They are great producing and creating content. They also have their own sessions. I know Chris Emmett from the UK does 2-hour build sessions on Flow. And then if you want to look at blogs, Jen Lee is obviously one of the greatest on Flow. She has a great blog. If you want to read and learn, she has probably one of the best blogs out there. She has a very structured format. So use cases, this is what you do. The pro tip, do this, whatever. So it's kind of like a classic training material kind of content, very structured. Narender from Germany has a blog as well, Force Panda. He's very advanced. Oh yeah, unofficial SF flow resources are very good. These are more advanced stuff. Like Narendra usually talks about more advanced topics on his flow. He has also some less advanced, but mostly more advanced. He's a developer. And unofficial SF has elements and components that people program that you can install in your instance to use that make your life easier. Many of them are also programmed by Salesforce employees themselves, but they are not officially supported by Salesforce, so they have to be published on unofficial SF. It's kind of like use at your own risk kind of thing, but they are very useful. They are not going to blow up your instance. Don't take my word on that. I can't guarantee that, but so yeah.
Thank you, Andy.